All lives matter. And that is why Black lives matter. All lives matter because life is a sacred opportunity in which each of our souls are afforded the immense gift to know the truth. However you want to interpret that, we have an opportunity to research, study, and investigate, and see and wake up to truth. Scientific truth, spiritual truth, the truth of ourselves, the truth of our spirit, the truth of reality. There is one place that is built for that endeavor, and that is the planet Earth. And a human birth, as they say in Hinduism, is a rare gift in the universe that affords a soul the opportunity to do that work and to know that truth. So a life is a precious gift. A gift to make an entire human story with the time you have on the planet. And every one of us has that gift. Black, white, brown, yellow, red, mauve, and puce. And because all of those lives matter, we have to then take a moment when we hear one group of our community crying out and saying, "Hey, our lives are being treated with less respect and less regard." And that is what's happening in the United States now. White lives, God bless them for all of the gifts they have brought. The art, the culture, the structures of government, the concepts of an expanded government that guarantees human liberties, freedoms, and rights. The buildings, the economy, the jobs, the inventions, all of those wonderful European American gifts. Yet, the white culture in which all of these have been built and shared with the multiracial culture that is the United States was in its genesis built on white supremacy. Native Americans were regarded as barbarians and were treated as though they needed to be brought to the standards of white civilization. It was called at one time in European history the white man's burden, that we have to instruct the noble savages, that these weren't just trash lives of these weird savages, they were noble at heart, God's children as well, and we as enlightened white men with our beautiful civilization, our fancy clothes and our tall buildings and our fancy machines, because we're doing so well, it's up to us to train them. You can find these kinds of philosophies throughout European political treatment of their colonies in Africa, in the Americas, and in Asia. That we, the enlightened European white people, must train and bring up to standards of civilization everyone else who's not wearing what we're wearing and doing what we're doing. And that is why red lives, when white men appeared on North America, why native lives seemed to count for less. Well, if they can't be brought to live up to our standards and they keep fighting us, then we have to protect ourselves. All's fair in love and war. And that's why once disease had decimated enormous majorities of Native American populations, smallpox, other European diseases brought over, for which the white people were not necessarily directly responsible, well, other than the incidences where they strategically supplied infected blankets to certain peoples. Once that plague had decimated Native American lives, and once they had lost the wars to the white people, the white expanding Canadians and Americans, and the Spaniards, it must be remembered, and the Portuguese. Once that had all settled, why those Native Americans were put in schools to teach them to be white. So you see there again, the cultural norm, the cultural basis was white European and later white American culture. It wasn't called white culture, it was called culture. It wasn't called white civilization, it was called civilization. And then it made great, rampant economic leaps forward by turning its raw materials, the enormous, the vast resources, natural resources that America had, were turned into commercial goods, refined in England, France, and the northern states in the United States. But you know, it takes a lot of manpower before the age of the machines to gather those natural resources. And so slaves were used. Slaves were appropriated and used. There were slave markets in Africa, and English and American traders, and Dutch and Spanish and Portuguese traders all took heavy advantage of those slave markets in Africa, and they quadrupled. They 10 times increased the slave trade that had existed prior, bringing them the vast majority to the West Indies, which is the Caribbean islands, to Brazil, to the Spanish-American states, and to the 13 English colonies. And black people became slaves in the United States. And their lives were certainly not regarded on a par with white. In fact, the most generous predominant regard towards black lives was that they were like children and needed to be cared for. So patronizing. We well know the history of the Civil War and how the slaves were freed. A little grayer is the knowledge of the struggle of black people from the time of Reconstruction, a brief time during which there were black state legislatures in the South and black congressmen. For a brief while, before the advent of the KKK and before white civilization brought around all kinds of rules, Jim Crow laws, and other kind of legal machinations to deprive black citizens of their rights, of their equal participation in American society, and to deny them their votes. All kinds of tricks, which in the 20th century, one by one, the Supreme Court corrected until 1964, when the civil rights legislation, so fought for so hardly by Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, all of their compatriots, their allies, were finally passed into law. Since that time, America has continued to wrestle with this issue of race. There have always been and continue to be white people who just don't like black people or think that they're equal, or brown people, Latino people, or native people, or even Asian people, or sometimes even white people who aren't like them, gay, Irish, Catholic. In my home state of Maine, French Canadians who have lived in America, even French descended Americans who've lived in America for generations, are regarded as inferior, more stupid, they're lazier, they don't work well, they're violent, they drink a lot. The same prejudices, they just found the most available subclass. So we see in America that there has been this continuing history of regarding people not like the paradigm of white European culture as less than, as being able to participate in, but not being the progenitors of, the creators of, and therefore the equal participants in this white culture. And this white culture has built mechanisms since the very days of slavery on up to the current day. It has built mechanisms by which those other races, those other Americans, are labeled as inferior and disenfranchised from equal participation in all of our institutions, not the least of which voting. Not the least of which voting. Read Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, to discover how people in the White House and Congress during the Nixon administration came up with a plan to disenfranchise black voters. Put it into action under Reagan's administration, calling it the war on drugs, which was really a war on poor neighborhoods and neighborhoods of color, because everyone was taking drugs in equal numbers. White people smoke as much pot, sniff as much cocaine as black people. But it was the black neighborhoods and the brown neighborhoods that were policed, and not the white ones. I had friends in college who smoked pot so regularly it was commonplace. I was the oddity for not smoking pot in my predominantly white college in the Northeast. One friend of mine sold it by the bags full. I would walk into her dorm and she had bags of pot. Never a peep of police investigation. But we all know in Los Angeles this term ghetto birds is the word for police helicopters, because the police inordinately are inserting themselves into black neighborhoods, looking for people and busting them who are doing anything from crack and meth to smoking pot. There's more to that story. I urge you to read Michelle Alexander's book or to look for videos of her speaking on YouTube. Michelle Alexander, The New Jim Crow. All this to say that there has been a systemic, established supremacy that places white culture as the norm, as culture, and black participation in that culture and black culture as aberrant or less than or unwelcome, and has disenfranchised it both because black people overwhelmingly vote liberal, and liberal philosophy challenges economic power by powerful financial institutions that have had their hands in American government since the early days, banksters, and other people of color who vote similarly. So we have two problems. One, disenfranchisement for political purposes of black people and people of color. But attendant on that, because those institutions repeat the structures and the messages that say, oh yeah, black people are here, and yeah, they're full-blooded Americans, we like them too. Not they are us. Not they are our neighbors. Not they are Americans. Not they are us. But they are us too. A subtle difference that says separate but equal. Separate but equal. And what that messaging does is it allows people who have fear of the unknown, fear of the other, to act on that and to think further down that path and to think of other people as less than, to disvalue their experience and their lives. First, not to listen to them closely, because when you listen to people, you tend to understand them and grow towards them and grow in unity. And then not listening to them, to discount what they're saying and to then discount their actual participation. And it allows the growth of stigma. Some people, when they start to label these people and message about them, well, black people are just violent. Look at all the crime they have in their neighborhoods. Of course there's a heavier police presence in their neighborhoods. They're committing more crimes. Why might black people seem to be committing more crimes? One, depends on the crime. Crimes of poverty, like theft and drug use, perhaps. How many of of the people that ruined the country and performed vastly illegal, grossly illegal acts, playing with illegal financial instruments that broke the economy of the world in 2008. How many of them were prosecuted? I know of 2. And they weren't the biggest ones, not the biggest names, not the architects. But black people are criminals, right? How many CEOs did it take to ruin the world? And what happens when one black person smokes a joint? And who gets life in prison? And who gets 3 strikes laws? So I'm showing you the disparity between the value of lives, white, culture, white, and black lives and black culture. Everyone is born equal, that's right. So those who say, why all this hue and cry, we're all equal, can't we just be equal? I'm telling you, the institutions have made us unequal, and people are being treated vastly unfairly. Black people are incarcerated at exponentially higher rates than white people, in a system that was built to incarcerate black people at astronomically higher proportions than white people, partly because it gets rid of their ability to vote. It disenfranchises them. They don't take advantage of the institutions that are available to the remaining white people. It worked in Florida in 2000. If you read Greg Palast, a reporter for the Guardian newspaper in England, Greg Palast wrote a book called The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. He lays out for you how the election in Florida in 2000 was rigged in favor of the Republican Party. And one of the big ways it was rigged was the voter rolls. The registration rolls of Florida were sent to a data company in Georgia that was owned by Republicans, that was paid to purge the voter rolls of Florida with the names of anyone who had a prison record, because prisoners can't vote in Florida. And what they did, Greg Palast documents it, he even has the documents to show you, they purged the rolls in Florida of anyone with an even black-sounding name. Legally registered voters were removed from the voter rolls. Thousands of black people were removed from the voter rolls because, again, black people tend to vote liberal. So, because all lives matter, because there is a system that has injustice, that is treating black lives as though they don't matter, as though they are less important, we need to repeat this phrase. Black lives matter. They matter also. All lives matter. Black lives are having trouble right now, and we need to say, remember how all lives matter? Black lives are part of that. Black lives matter. Right now, police are shooting and killing black people of crimes that white people get tickets for. Why do the black people get thrown to the curb? Why do the black people get the guns drawn so quickly? Why do the black people get shot as a reflex action, on sight, at 12 years of age, when the white people can go into a church and shoot many people, and when arrested they get a bulletproof vest? Why this difference? Why? Because there's a disparity in how those policemen, those few among many, and thank you to those who are doing their jobs well and with equal vision, because there are enough policemen for whom black means, oh, they're that way, they're violent. I better shoot now quick because they're violent, they might kill me because they're black. That's, how that goes. They're ghetto. The lives are counted as either violent in incorrect stereotypes, or they just don't matter as much as a black person. is racism. It is bigotry. It is disgusting and unfair. And if you allow your spirit to reside in a mentality that believes that and allows that to continue to exist, you are stunting your spiritual growth. You will not make it all the way to your God's side. You will not merge with your God's divinity. You will not find favor in your God's heaven if you are left there at that stopping point. You must see your neighbor as yourself. See God in each other. Black lives especially now, because they're having trouble. Because they're being treated vastly unfairly. And those of us who grew up white and have been able to take advantage of relative ease, not to say white people are without hardship, because anyone who's poor knows that is not so. Yet, the police are not quite as quick to kill us. And the college admissions officers are a little more likely to give us scholarships. According to statistics, we get 70% of them. Because we have this handful of graces extra. It's up to us to share. So how do we do that? What can we do? Stop talking. Sorry not to follow my own advice at this moment. But that's the first thing I had to learn. Stop thinking you're right about everything, particularly about race. Listen to black people and people of color and Native Americans. Listen to how they explain their experience. Let them guide you. You may have it. You may have pieces of it. You may have a lot of it. But it's worth listening to. Make sure you have it. And to learn the nuances you don't have. I was raised in a liberal, equality-minded household that venerated Martin Luther King. We protested against the Vietnam War. We were disgusted by the crimes of Watergate. We didn't vote for Reagan. We were horrified by Reagan's presidency. We were feminists. We supported the Equal Rights Amendment. We supported the Equal Rights Amendment supporting equal rights for women. We're pro-choice. But I can still find racism inside of my consciousness. I can still find times in my life when I flinched at a hoodie or similar behavior. When I looked at my black friends or neighbors as other than. When I was nervous around black friends because I didn't want to offend them, and so avoided talking about issues of race because I didn't want to rock the boat. Times in my life when I enjoyed ease and freedom, when police didn't search me, but they searched my black friend inordinately, and that I didn't protest, and I didn't tell the policeman, hey, that's unjust. I watched a very uncomfortable video recently where a young black woman was saying with great passion, all white people are racist. All you motherfucking white people are racist. And she wasn't name-calling. She was pointing out that we've all grown up in a society that has a systemic supremacy for one race. And that teaches in overt ways sometimes and subtle ways other times that black lives are different. That they're less weighty, less consideration. And I can still find moments of it. So for that reason, I mean, look at me. I'm a little liberal. So if it's in me, I'm telling you, she may well be right. All white people. So what I do, I shut up and I listen. And I take my cues from my black friends and I try to educate myself as best I can. And I stay open-minded and at the ready to find, okay, what am I saying? What do I need to examine what I'm saying? I think I'm not that racist. but there are times when I do need to check. That's one thing you can do. Listen and check. And then the next thing you can do is do not stay comfortable, but start to make noise. Post, write, and speak about how these issues are so important right now because people are dying. People are being killed by our tax-paid police. We're paying these people who are killing our neighbors unjustly. Support the people who do good and point out their examples and post about their examples that this is the way community policing works, protecting and serving, and showing the errors and decrying the errors and calling for action when there are gross errors in policing and unfairness. That's what you can do. Share. That's what else you can do. People sometimes decry affirmative action, calling it reverse discrimination, because all people should be considered equal. If we're all equal races, we should be considered equal. Ideally, that's true. But as we've been talking about, black people are not considered equal by many institutions, not the least of which police, and frankly not colleges either. 70% of scholarships go to white students. Yes, there are instances where white students were denied scholarships in favor of colored students. Statistically, 70% of scholarships still go to white students. And, it must be said, scholarships are much harder to come by these days than ever before. There's just not the same money that there used to be. Affirmative action is still necessary because there are still racist policies that favor white over black. And what affirmative action does is it levels the playing field. It says white society has had these advantages and they never gave a leg up to black society. Even after slavery was abolished, the slaves built our empire for us. Why don't we share some of it with them? Oh, well, they can make their own way. They can pull themselves up by their bootstraps, just like the white people did. Never mind that we've passed laws against their economic advantage, that we've redlined their neighborhoods so that they get the crappy houses, the crappy schools, the schools with no money, the schools with old textbooks. A lesser education means lesser job opportunities, job availability. So affirmative action is how we go out of our way to make sure they get as good textbooks as we have, as the white people have. Affirmative action gives the leg up to the people on whose legs we built our empire. It's how we share with people who've been down here while we've enjoyed this. There will come a day, but that day is not yet. The police are shooting our black citizens in the streets for no good reason. Why? Maybe they don't think their lives matter quite as much. Maybe when they look at them, they don't see themselves. And here's Sister Unity's spiritual truth of the whole thing. Black people are white people, and white people are black people underneath it all. All lives matter, and that's why Black lives matter. Because black lives are everybody's lives. So let's get to work.